Here's the expanded version with more paragraphs. The restaurant was almost empty when it happened. Just the hum of a ceiling fan and the distant clatter of someone's chai glass. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Her UPI app had been throwing errors for 3 days straight, something about a flagged account. The waiter placed the thali in front of her without asking. Steel plate, 6 small bowls, steam rising in slow curls from the dal. She almost cried at the smell of it. Turmeric and ghee. She hadn't realized how deeply hunger could make a person feel alone. Her phone buzzed, her sister, again. She silenced it. There was nothing to say that wouldn't require explaining everything from the beginning. The restaurant was a small Udupi joint off Linking Road in Mumbai. Plastic chairs, hand-painted menu board, a small Ganesha above the counter. She sat with her hands wrapped around the steel cup of rasam. Warm. Solid. The only thing that felt real in weeks. When she reached for her wallet, she already knew. The card would decline. It had declined 4 times in the past 2 days. Outside, a crow landed on the windowsill and looked at her sideways. She almost laughed. Even the bird sensed something was wrong. Her name was Priya. 31 years old. A UX designer who had just lost her freelance contract after the client startup folded in March 2026. 3 months of work. 42,000 rupees, gone, along with the company's servers and their founders' LinkedIn profiles. She'd filed a complaint on the government's new Scores 2.0 grievance portal. It had been pending for 6 weeks with a status reading under review. Her savings account held 212 rupees. Her rent was due in 9 days. She had told nobody. She had rehearsed telling people. Practiced the words in the shower, in the auto, in the dark before sleep finally arrived. But every time she opened her mouth, something sealed it shut. Pride, maybe. Or the fear that saying it aloud would make it permanent. Mumbai doesn't slow down for private collapses. Outside the window, a delivery rider on a Zomato bike weaved between a Tesla cab and a Best bus. The city had changed fast, AI-generated storefronts, gig economy hubs on every corner, startup culture on every podcast. But broke was still just broke. She'd applied to 11 companies in 5 weeks. 7 used automated screening tools that filtered her out before any human saw her portfolio. 3 sent rejection emails written so warmly they felt almost cruel. We loved your work, the timing just isn't right. One company had ghosted her entirely after a final round interview. She still checked her inbox every morning, then hated herself for checking. She had started rationing meals 2 weeks ago. 1 proper meal a day, sometimes 2 small ones. She told herself it was intermittent fasting. She had told herself many things. That this was temporary. That the market would shift. That someone would reply. The waiter was watching her now. Not unkindly, just the practiced awareness of someone who knew when a customer was stalling. Madam, bill? His voice was gentle. She nodded and opened her wallet, arranging herself into the posture of someone who was perfectly fine. The card reader beeped twice. Declined. She tapped again. The screen flashed red, a small humiliation with enormous weight. Sorry, she said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. The waiter looked at the machine, then at her, saying nothing. She was calculating, could she leave something as collateral? Her phone? Her small silver earrings, which had belonged to her mother. The earrings were the last thing her mother had given her before the surgery. She touched them instinctively, protectively. Not those. She heard a chair scrape behind her. A man stood up from the corner table she hadn't really noticed. He walked toward the counter. He was perhaps 55. Gray at the temples, a plain white cotton shirt, reading glasses still perched on his nose, a worn paperback in hand. He spoke to the cashier in Marathi, low and even. Then he placed a 500 rupee note on the counter and walked back to his table. The cashier looked at Priya. Settled, he said simply, and moved on to cleaning the counter as if nothing unusual had occurred. She turned to the man. He had already returned to his book. He didn't look up. He was not performing generosity, he was reading. That detail undid her completely. No eye contact. No waiting for gratitude. No story to tell later. He had simply done it. She stood there holding her empty wallet, not knowing what to do with her hands, not knowing what to do with what she felt. She walked to his table. "Excuse me," she said. He looked up, mildly. "Thank you." "I don't know how to," he shook his head. "My daughter is your age," he said. "She had a hard year too." Then he went back to his book. That was all. Priya sat back down at her own table. The thali was cooling. She ate slowly now, because she could. Because someone had made space for that. The rasam hit the back of her throat, sour and peppery and achingly familiar. Her grandmother used to make it on Sundays in Mysore. She ate every last grain. Scraped the steel bowls clean. Not out of greed, out of something closer to gratitude made physical. She had spent 3 months treating her crisis as a personal failure. A data point. A gap in the resume she needed to explain away. She had not once thought of it as something that could happen to anyone, that it had perhaps already happened to someone sitting nearby. Outside, the city continued its relentless optimism. A billboard advertised an AI upskilling course, future-proof yourself for 999 Indian rupees per month. The irony was exhausting. She thought about the man's daughter. She wondered if that woman knew her father thought about her in quiet restaurants, in small ordinary moments. She thought about her own father, retired, in Mysore, who called every Sunday and never asked about money because asking would mean acknowledging the answer. She thought about how much energy she had spent appearing fine. How exhausting it was, this full-time performance of coping. Nobody had asked her to perform it. She had cast herself in the role and rehearsed it daily without a single audience member requesting a ticket. She took out her phone. Not to check email. She opened her sister's contact and typed, "I'm okay. But I need help. Can we talk tonight?" Sending it felt like putting something down she hadn't realized she was carrying. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. Her jaw unclenched. She looked at the man once more before she left. He had finished his tea and was deep in the book. She didn't disturb him. She wanted to ask what he was reading. She wanted to say something that matched the size of what he'd done. There were no such words. She stepped out into the Mumbai afternoon, loud, dense, indifferent, alive. A notification came in, her sister had replied in under a minute. "I'm here. Call whenever." 5 words. She read them 3 times. Each time they meant something slightly different and slightly more. The city looked slightly different now. Not better, exactly. But more honest, like something had been adjusted by a single degree, and now the angle was true. She had been waiting to earn the right to ask for help. To have a better story, cleaner numbers, a plan already in motion. A stranger with a paperback had not waited for any of that. He had simply seen the moment and stepped into it, then gone back to his page. She walked toward the station, past the Zomato rider, past the AI storefront, past the city that would not slow down for her. But she was walking differently now, not fixed, not saved, not suddenly certain, just marginally less alone, which is sometimes all it takes. 3 days later, her sister transferred 10,000 rupees. No lecture. No conditions. Just a message, pay me back whenever. Or don't. I mean it. A week after that, a recruiter messaged her on LinkedIn, a small product studio in Pune, building accessibility tools for visually impaired users. The work was meaningful in a way her previous contracts hadn't been. The salary was modest. She took it without negotiating. She thought about the man sometimes, on the auto ride to her new office, in the early mornings when Mumbai was briefly quiet. She never saw him again. She looked, in a vague and unplanned way, each time she passed that street. He was never there. But the Udupi restaurant was still there. Same plastic chairs. Same Ganesha. Same waiter with the same gentle, watchful eyes. She went back one afternoon, 3 months later. Ordered the thali. Paid for it easily this time, and paid for the man at the next table too. He looked up, confused. She smiled and looked away, back at her phone, back at her life, back at whatever came next. The real hunger, she understood then, was never only for food. It was to be seen without having to first explain why you needed seeing. He had paid her bill. He never knew her name. She never learned his. And yet it was the most honest transaction she'd had in months. Some debts don't get repaid to the person who gave them. They move forward, through you, into the world, towards someone who needs them next.